On this week's 51%, postpartum depression is one of the most common complications of childbirth. We speak with New York Times reporter Catherine Pearson to learn more about how PPD is affecting mothers across the U.S.
There is still this really pronounced gap in terms of women getting the care that they need.
We also stopped by a rally in Troy, New York, protesting the proposed closure of Rensselaer County's only maternity ward. I'm Jessie King. It's all up next on 51%.
I was standing around like one of those girls I had seen in a movie. The whole world was a movie back then. I had my sunglasses on, I wanted to be seen without seeing shy Lolita. I wasn't really in it, I didn't really get it.
You're listening to 51%, a WAMC production dedicated to women's issues and experiences. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jessie King. Today we have a roundup of stories and interviews dealing with motherhood, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll start with a story out of New York's capital region, but it's a story many areas around the country, particularly rural neighborhoods, may find familiar. Roughly 3.5 million babies are born in the U.S. each year, and according to a report from the infant and maternal health nonprofit March of Dimes in 2022, more than 146,000 babies were born in what it considers maternity care deserts. Counties with no access to maternity care resources, such as OBGYN providers and hospitals and birth centers offering obstetric care. In fact, it says the number of maternity care deserts rose 2% since 2020 to 1,119 counties nationwide. That's roughly 2.2 million women of childbearing age who would have to either make a trip when they're in labor or give birth at home. In Troy, New York, midwives, nurses, and community members are protesting a move they say would turn Rensselaer County into a maternity care desert.
Burdett Birth Center provides safety, Burdett Birth Center provides choice, Burdett Birth Center provides care for the entire Rensselaer County. Burdett Birth Center needs to stay open, period.
Samaritan Hospital could close its Burdett Birth Center within 6 months if plans are approved by the New York State Department of Health. St. Peter's Health Partners, which owns the hospital and is part of Michigan-based Trinity Healthcare, cites staffing and financial concerns exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The rally at the YWCA of the Greater Capital Region saw parents, children, and nurses brandishing signs reading "Save Burdett Birth Center" and "Midwives Save Lives." Many demonstrators were quick to note that they were born at Samaritan Hospital or had given birth at Burdett. They say the closure would create a dangerous situation at a time when the nation's maternal mortality rate is on the rise. BirthNet Board of Directors co-chair Esther Patterson says the current plan would force expecting mothers to travel as far as Albany, Niskayuna, Saratoga Springs, or even Pittsfield, Massachusetts when they're in labor, creating a ripple effect throughout the capital region.
Closing Burdett would mean that St. Peter's Hospital and Albany Medical Center would have to absorb the close to 1,000 births that would have occurred at Burdett, which would tax their already overburdened clinics and labor and delivery rooms, and make giving birth for women of color even more unsafe than the current statistics show.
Data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows the number of women who died in and around childbirth rose to more than 1,200 in 2021, a sharp increase from what was already considered a dramatic rise during the COVID-19 pandemic. The CDC says Black women are roughly 3 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related cause than white women due to a lack of quality health care, chronic conditions, structural racism, and implicit bias. Birth doula Jayana LaFontaine says she often refers her clients, many women of color, to Burdett. She says she is devastated by the news, fearing the closure could be catastrophic for low-income women across the county.
People will die. It is not a question, it is a fact, not a matter of if, but a matter of when. Not everybody can afford to have a home birth, not everybody wants a home birth, not everyone can get transported to the nearest hospitals, and so forth.
For its part, St. Peter's says its plan preserves prenatal care in Troy, and even after the closure of Burdett, the Samaritan Hospital emergency room will remain open to mothers in labor. Even for those who can make the drive to Albany, though, Elizabeth Gray of Troy says having Burdett close by was a comfort during her first pregnancy. Gray became pregnant with her son Francis just as the state began announcing COVID-19 lockdowns in 2020. She had just left her job to finish her doctorate and was navigating a new health insurance provider. And to top it all off, the week Francis was due, in December 2020, saw back-to-back snowstorms in the capital region.
We literally talked about the fact that I could be dragged to the hospital in a sled if that was necessary. And knowing that I'd be in a birth center in my own room, which kept me apart from the rest of the hospital, gave me such a sense of relief. Ultimately, he was late, and the snow had melted, and I had to be induced, so I was in the hospital for several days before giving birth and a few days following. And I cannot tell you, to be in one space for the preparation, labor, delivery, and recovery was such a gift.
Burdett Birth Center first opened in 2011 out of a merger between Samaritan Hospital and St. Mary's Seton Health. The doula network of the Capital Region says Burdett is the only regional maternity ward that exceeds the recommendations set by the federal government's Healthy People 2020 initiative. And according to St. Peter's Perinatal Regional Center, the primary cesarean rate at Samaritan Hospital is 12.7%, much lower than the statewide rate of 28.9%. Many of the rally-goers credit that record with the variety of care options at Burdett, particularly its collaborative midwifery model. Birth doula Jessica Hayek says worldwide, midwives attend roughly 70% of all births. She says having a midwife or doula on hand for the ups and downs of pregnancy, delivery, and the postpartum period allows mothers to receive more attentive and personalized care.
The thing about Burdett is that people have access to all the options, whatever they may need to bring their baby safely and joyfully earthside. Burdett has it. So we know when people are in labor and they're able to move around during that labor, it helps facilitate a quicker birth. Burdett supports that. We know that when hydrotherapy is available, people have a more satisfying and peaceful experience. Burdett provides that. We know that when birthing people are respected and included in their care plan and decision making, they leave their birth experience feeling empowered. And birth is the jump-off point for parenting for all of us.
In a statement to WAMC, a spokesman for St. Peter's attributes at least part of Samaritan's low cesarean rate to its being a Level 1 low-risk center. St. Peter's Hospital in Albany, a Level 3 high-risk birth center, is also on the lower end, with a primary C-section rate of 23.7%. St. Peter says it has offered to help Burdett staff relocate to other positions within its system, adding, quote, "By bringing the highly trained staff at Samaritan to St. Peter's, we will have the ability to tap into the expertise of midwives and other birthing caregivers who the community has grown to rely on and trust during their birthing journey. With these birth models now in a centralized location, it will serve to further enhance a program long recognized for its excellence," end quote. Since the rally, the Troy City Council passed a resolution calling on Governor Kathy Hochul to block the plan. Local and state officials on both sides of the aisle, including Mayor Patrick Madden, Rensselaer County Executive Steve McLaughlin, and State Assemblyman John McDonald, met with Commissioner of Health James McDonald to voice their concerns. Speaking at the state capitol in Albany this week, Assemblyman McDonald gave protesters an update.
We heard this is the beginning of the process. The process is not a fait accompli. Trinity will be required to do the health equity assessment that they thought they may not have to do, which is a win for all of us from every stretch of the imagination. But probably the most important message that came out of this meeting, the Department of Health has been deluged, just like my office and every other elected official's office, of letters of opposition. And we need to keep that up. Yes. The reality is this closing is not a fait accompli. We need to keep up our voices, our advocacy. We need to keep fighting to keep the Burdett Center open. Thank you.
For pictures of the rally and more information on the closure, you can go to WAMC.org. Postpartum depression is one of the most common complications of childbirth. You may have heard of the baby blues, but PPD is a much more serious and long-lasting sense of sadness and hopelessness. According to data from the CDC, it's a leading cause of pregnancy-related deaths in the U.S., and it impacts roughly 1 in 8 women up to a year after giving birth. Our main guests today are Shivani Hiralal, a mother of 1 in Phoenix, Arizona, and Catherine Pearson, a reporter for the Well section of the New York Times. Pearson has long been reporting on PPD and perinatal mental health in general. In one of her latest pieces, she spoke with women like Hiralal to get an inside look at what it's like to struggle with the condition. She found that PPD is very isolating in nature, and that isolation is only intensified by everyday financial concerns and issues like a lack of childcare or paid parental leave.
I think we're at this sort of really interesting period because for so many years, generations of women had this experience and nobody really talked about it. It wasn't officially recognized as a diagnosis until, like the mid 90s. So this has been happening obviously for forever. And the conversation has really shifted over the past few decades in terms of there is now a recognition both among moms and sort of at a clinical level of just how common this is. This is an incredibly common complication of having a baby. And yet there is still this really pronounced gap in terms of women getting the care that they need. The CDC has these really striking statistics that say, about more than half of women with postpartum depression continue to go untreated. And, 20% of moms are never asked during a prenatal visit about depression. And I will just say, like, anecdotally, as someone who's had 2 kids myself in the last 10-ish years, I was never asked. I was never asked at a prenatal appointment. I was never asked postpartum. I was never asked by a pediatrician. So I just think there's this really sort of striking contrast and dissonance that's happening right now. And unfortunately, it just means a lot of women are not getting the care that they need.
So to help us get a better picture of it, I guess, what did postpartum depression look like in the women that you spoke to? How did it look different than the baby blues?
Yeah, so I want to be very clear that I'm obviously not a clinician here, but there is this sort of the baby blues are this really common experience that most women have in the sort of days and weeks after having a baby, where you feel these hormonal highs and lows. You're exhausted. There's sort of all these changes that are happening at once. Postpartum depression is really distinct from that because it is a longer term thing that typically is diagnosed within the first year postpartum. And I think that's really striking too. So it's this idea of like, it could happen, several months after you give birth. And I also think that mental health providers do like to use this sort of broader term of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, or PMADs, because that captures, women who might have anxiety that comes on during pregnancy, or, women who might have postpartum OCD that crops up, several months after they give birth, or frankly, men experience this, people who have not actually given birth experience this. So it's just this huge area that is so common, and we're just really starting to understand how many people are affected by this.
Shivani, if you don't mind my asking a little bit about your experience, at what point did you realize that you were struggling with postpartum depression?
Yeah, my onset of postpartum depression was fairly quick because my symptoms were very severe based on just kind of my birthing experience being traumatic, and having had other experiences prior to delivery where I almost lost my husband.
Wow.
I think a lot of those contributed to the anxiety and depression that I faced after delivery. The physical recovery part of it was really challenging, as well as the mental recovery. And then your hormones are all over the place. And you as a mother and as a new parent are trying to take care of a new baby who's relying on you for food, safety, everything. So within, I would say at the 4-week mark is when I was already diagnosed by my therapist that I had postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, just because of how my symptoms presented.
When you say your symptoms, what exactly did those symptoms look like?
I was literally just crying all the time. I would have trouble just kind of relaxing or trying to sleep. I was just really, really hard on myself. Like, why am I not feeling better? Why am I feeling this way? Like, I want to be back to normal. But it was a lot of like frustration on the little things, loss of appetite for sure. I couldn't eat as much, and I had my parents here helping in those first couple of months. And I remember my mom saying like, hey, like you have to eat, and you only ate a little bit. And I was like, I just don't feel like eating. So like the loss of appetite, the uncontrollable crying, that kind of came up whenever. And then those feelings of guilt. I had these feelings and this voice inside of my head that kept telling me like, you're not a good mom, you're not a good mom. And I was starting to believe that I'm not a good mom. So those were some of the things that I experienced.
I guess, what do you feel people most misunderstand about this experience?
I think because it's such a stigmatized topic, and the fact that it wasn't talked about and given the attention that it needed, I think that really affects how it's viewed now. Now I think people misconstrue like, oh, she's just going through some things, she'll be fine. And they often overlook how postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and other perinatal mental health disorders can also be presented as just, oh, it's fine. Like, the person will get over it. And that's really not the case. I think better care needs to be given, especially during that postpartum period. And I think I told Catherine this as we were discussing the article that went out, is, you're given so much care, especially leading up to your delivery day with weekly appointments, monthly appointments to begin with, and then weekly appointments leading up to your delivery. And then once you deliver, it's I'll see you at your 6-week checkup, and that's it. And that's what I feel like needs to change, because that's really that crucial time in which new parents feel a lot of overwhelm and can really need that support, especially from like a healthcare provider that can identify, hey, you know what, maybe this is presenting in a little bit more of a severe way. This is not just your typical baby blues.
Just to jump in there, because I would agree, I think there's a little bit of a misconception that because there is this increased awareness, and because we have groups like the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists sort of calling for universal screening, and the American Academy of Pediatrics encouraging people to be screened, there's still just such a disconnect between those guidelines and the reality of what women are facing. So, in addition to Shivani, I spoke to one mom, Allie, who had this really striking experience of going to a pediatrician's appointment with her baby at about 1 month or so, and filling out one of those sort of standard screeners and saying like, okay, I'm going to fill this out. I'm going to answer these questions. And I know that this is going to be a red flag. They're going to say this woman is really struggling with postpartum depression, and sort of like saying to herself, sure, I'm going to do this and we'll see what happens. And then she did it and no one followed up with her. And another mom I talked to, Carrie, was talking about how she finally got herself screening for this, or sort of basically said to a clinician, like, I'm grappling with this, I'm experiencing this. And then they said, we will get you therapy in 4 to 6 weeks. So I just think that there's just this sense that like, oh, once you recognize this, or someone will screen you for it and you can get it taken care of. And I just think that the obstacles that women face while they're taking care of new babies are just incredible. It's just incredible. So.
Well, lastly, Shivani, like, how have you coped so far? You mentioned that you have your therapist and your family was able to luckily come and help you a little bit, but what advice do you have out there for new moms who might be struggling with this? How have you been getting through it?
Yeah. So for me, I had my parents come and stay with me for a couple of months to help me sort of recover, both physically and also focus on my mental recovery as well. And I had the support of my therapist, who I had already been seeing previously to delivery. And the other really amazing resource out there is Postpartum Support International. They are the largest maternal mental health nonprofit, and provide all of the resources for families, individuals, parents, dads, anyone that is going through this for free at no cost, with various resources like free support groups, which I actually did attend free support groups. They have peer mentor programs. We have a hotline that people can call and you'd be connected with the person live, and a warm line. And so you can call either of those numbers and you'll be connected with somebody that can connect you to the appropriate resources, even if you're looking for resources specifically in your area. So we are across the board nationally, and it's an amazing resource. I actually currently am one of the staff at Postpartum Support International. Now, as I'm here sharing my story, I just wanted to share that resource is out there and available to everyone at no cost. And it's a wonderful resource because I personally have used them, so I know it does really help to sort of build up a support system outside of family members, because I do understand that everyone's situation is a little bit different. Geographically, it may not be feasible to have family come and stay with you. And maybe you don't have too many people that live nearby that can help support you. But I think that there are a lot of resources out there. It's just a matter of sifting through and finding the right community that you can build for yourself.
Shivani Hiralal is a mother of one in Phoenix, Arizona. She's one of 4 women featured in a new piece by New York Times reporter Catherine Pearson, highlighting the struggles of postpartum depression. You can read Shivani's story and more in the paper's Well section at nytimes.com. To learn more about Postpartum Support International and their support groups, check out postpartum.net. And if you or someone you love is in crisis or having thoughts of suicide, you are not alone. You can call or text 988 anytime to reach the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Catherine and Shivani, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Speaking of finding community, our last guest ended up building a platform for women around the world to share their stories. Leslie Means is the founder and owner of Her View from Home, a faith-based lifestyle blog where more than 1,000 mothers currently post reflections on everything from parenting and relationships to religion and grief. Means says it's an idea that launched from her closet when her kids were just 4 and 2 years old, but it has since grown to roughly 2.5 million readers worldwide. To celebrate, Means and her writers have put together a collection of some of their favorite stories in a new book called So God Made a Mother. Means spoke with our Dr. Sharon Ufberg, co-founder of the personal development and wellness company Borrowed Wisdom, for her 51% segment, Force of Nature.
I'm so stubborn, and I know I'm stubborn. That's a product of my parents. But when my girls were little, they're now 14 and 12 now, and I have a 6-year-old too. But when they were little, I didn't pick up a single parenting book. I was just sure I could do this all on my own. And somebody recently said to me, they said, Leslie, but wasn't that right when they were little? That's when you built Her View from Home. And it's this community for moms of all ages and stages to come together and share their stories. They're like, you were building that because you needed that at that time, and you still do. I'm like, oh, boom. Like, that's it. That's exactly it. I needed that community from other women. I didn't want them to tell me how to do it. I wanted to read their stories of how they were doing it. And that's what we ended up creating. And I think that's why it's so big today, is because that's what we need, is that connection from other women.
Any surprises from your community? Anything you learned that you didn't expect to learn?
You know, I'm a journalist at heart. If we're all given gifts, I feel like that's a gift of mine, that I can sit with someone and hear their perspective. Doesn't mean I agree with them, but I can listen to their story and kind of understand where they're at in life. And I have been surprised at how well the women have been able to do that on Her View from Home, how they're so different. I mean, we have stories, I don't know, we have thousands of articles published now from not just the United States, from really across the globe. And these women, even though we're very different, we look different, we act different, we come from very different backgrounds. At the core, we all want that same thing. You know, we all want love. We all want to be loved. We all want to feel seen and known. And we want to raise these babies the best way we can. I feel like that is something missing now in the world, especially the last few years. Everybody thinks we're so different, but at the core of it, we're not that different. And I love that the community has reminded me of that, especially with all the hardships in the last few years.
Now, you recently completed your first book, So God Made a Mother. What was your motivation to put this collection together? I mean, it sounds like your Her View from Home could keep you plenty busy, and a mother of 3 children. And so why this collection of essays?
So we always knew that we wanted to write a book with the authors that are on Her View from Home, but we didn't know what the title would be. And for me, it's really important to, I have to have those goosebump moments before I know those next steps. And it was actually April of 2020 when interesting. Like the world kind of got silent because we had to all go into our own homes, our own families, and focus on things. And I was in the bathtub and the title came to my mind, So God Made a Mother, because we have articles on her view from women who write, there's one like, God gave me sons, God made a mother, God made a grandma, and they go viral in the best way. And they are not, again, it's not a teaching piece. It's not a do this or believe this. It's truly just a heartfelt, sometimes really hard, vulnerable, real story. And I said that's the title. That's the title of the book. And we knew we had something then. It's the core of what her view is in this tangible book form. And it's just beautiful. And it's like a breath of fresh air, but it's not always feel good because there's some really hard stories in here, but it's real.
I would love if you could share perhaps a short excerpt from the book.
I would
Do you
love
have
to.
one that you might share with us today?
So this one is from Brittany Ming, and it's called My Metaphysical Pre-Pregnancy Genes. And this is the later part of it. She says, sometimes I pause and look around at the life I've built for myself and wonder what happened to everything I worked so hard for. I find myself reaching for castles in the sky, glorious structures I fashioned out of thin air. When I try to pull them close in an attempt to cling to the past, they slip through my fingers. And then I think again about those genes, my favorite fit like a glove, sexy genes, as I contemplate how long it's taken me to recover my life after my final baby, how nothing seems to fit, how I'm trying to find me again. I think I've been trying to fit into a pair of metaphysical pre-pregnancy genes, but they don't fit anymore. That part of my life is gone. It's changed. I've changed. This realization has taken me by surprise because I've been able to bounce back to my life and my goals after each baby. But the shift that took place after my daughter was born shook the foundation of my life. I'm learning how to stand up again, how to use my legs and take tentative steps forward on new untrodden paths. While my body is fully recuperated, my soul is still trying to recover. It's getting there. In the meantime, I'm learning to look at my life through new eyes. The ache for what was squeezes tight sometimes, but I can't wear my old life anymore, just like I can't wear those college jeans comfortably after kids. There's grief in the letting go, in unclenching my fingers from a season well lived, from goals and achievements accomplished, from work and vocations that serve their time and purpose. I eventually found new jeans, ones that were comfortable and made me feel confident, ones that made my husband raise his eyebrows and pull me into the laundry room for the type of kiss that promises more after the kids go to bed. As my last baby grows into a little girl, I have faith that I'm still growing too. There is joy ahead, fresh work and dreams, renewed confidence, different ways of being alive. I'm moving through all the changes and finding new ways of becoming myself.
Oh, it's so great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Who was the author of that?
That is Brittany Ming. Her View from Home is everywhere online, just herviewfromhome.com, and we're on all the social media channels. The book is being sold everywhere books are sold. So you could just Google So God Made a Mother and it'll pop up Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, all that good stuff. And then I am on social media too, just Leslie Means.
Thank you so much. That's Leslie Means, founder of Her View from Home and the author of So God Made a Mother. And this is Dr. Sharon Ufberg on Force of Nature for 51%.
That's a wrap on this week's 51%. 51% is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio in Albany, New York. It's produced and hosted by me, Jesse King. Our associate producer is Jody Cowan, and our theme is Lolita by the Albany-based artist Girl Blue. Just a reminder that you can listen to 51% anytime at WAMCpodcasts.org or wherever you get your podcasts. On social media, we're at WAMC Radio, and you can stay in the loop by signing up for our weekly newsletter, Airwaves, at WAMC.org. We hope you'll join us next week. Until then, I'm Jesse King, 51%.
I was every single girl, I was nobody else, I was so sure of myself. I was 15 and a half, he was a hollow laugh. And I lost my cool somewhere along the way. The night air down the hall